So today I'm going to show you how to make some small bread rolls using whole wheat flour and a strong white flour, and also an overnight sponge. This produces a really soft roll on the inside with a nice crispy exterior. Perfect for sandwiches, breakfast rolls, whatever you want. This has got you covered. Right, so first up, we're going to get the overnight sponge mixed up. Now in my bowl, I've got 130 grams of room temperature water. I'm going to add 50 grams of whole wheat flour and then 5 grams of yeast, which I'll just pinch through the water and the flour, and then add in another 100 grams of flour. This time it's going to be a strong white bread flour. Give all of that a good mix together with a spoon. It's going to be covered with cling film and it's going to sit out at room temperature to ferment for somewhere between 12 to 18 hours. So the amount of time this takes to ferment is obviously going to be dependent on our environment, the temperature in the kitchen. Now my kitchen temperature is 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this actually took 12 hours to ferment, but it doesn't need to be exact. It would have been fine leaving this for another 2 or 3 hours. Now I'm actually researching a country loaf, but a fermented country loaf made from fresh yeast for all of you guys out there who don't have sourdough starters. And during my research I actually came across this recipe for morning rolls in Andrew Whiteley's Bread Matters book. So I'll link to that in the description, and obviously as ever all of the recipe details will be in the description as well. So here we are 12 hours later, and as you can see, our overnight sponge has been through the process of rising up and then collapsing back down, but you can see all of the fermentation holes in there, and this smells completely different. You've kind of lost that raw yeasty smell and it's been replaced by this slightly acidic but very aromatic smell. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll just give you guys a closer look at this so you can see what you're shooting for and what this actually looks like. But interestingly, it just reminded me going through this process that I probably don't do this enough with either fresh or dried yeast. You know, my sourdoughs obviously always take a long time, but sometimes I can push through these baker's yeast breads probably a bit quick. This adds so much flavour. So now we'll build the main dough. Now I'm adding 270 grams of water to my overnight sponge, which weighs 285 grams. And to that, I'm going to add 10 grams of sea salt. I deviate slightly from Andrew's recipe here. He uses 5. Now, obviously all of my ingredients won't fit in this bowl, so I'll just pop it into my big mixing bowl and then follow up with 100 grams of whole wheat flour and 350 grams of strong bread flour. By the way, mine's got a protein content of 13%. We're going to give this a good mix. We're not looking to make a smooth dough, just to make sure all of the ingredients are really well incorporated. And then I'm going to weigh out 15 grams of unsalted butter, pop it on the top of the dough and just leave it there. Mainly so I don't forget about it, but also so it comes up to room temperature. Cover the bowl with a plastic bag and we're going to leave this to rest for about 20 to 30 minutes covered on our work surface, just to let that flour get nicely hydrated before we need it. Right, so here we are 30 minutes later with the main dough, and already you can see how that gluten's starting to build up, and that's all thanks to that overnight sponge. And it smells incredible, but I promise I'm not going to say that again. So let's get this flipped out straight onto the workbench and it's time to give it a knead. Now, obviously we're going to build some structure to the dough here. We're going to build some strength, but what we're also going to do is incorporate this butter. Now, as you first start to move this around, it's obviously going to feel a bit slippery and oily, but keep going, keep at it, and slowly that butter is going to emulsify into the dough, and you're going to end up with a really, really nice, soft, smooth, silky dough. Right, and once you've done that, we can get this balled up, popped back into our bowl, cover it up with a plastic bag, and we're going to leave this out on the bench at room temperature to prove. Right, and here you can see what you're shooting for. This is how the dough will look after it's proved. And as you can see, we've got another great second fermentation. The dough is beautifully soft. This is an absolute pleasure to work with. Now it's time to get our rolls divided up. Now you can either make 9 rolls with this or divide it up into 12. It's best to work in those numbers because then you get a nice grid on the baking tray. I'm actually going to make 9 here, but I've got another batch of this proving as well, and I'm going to make 12 rolls with that. You'll probably see that in the B-roll later. So I like to weigh the main dough and then divide it down so I've got equal dough balls. But again, you do not need to do this. You can certainly eyeball it. Now, by any means necessary, you need to shape these into dough balls, and you can do it any way you want. There's no rules. but I like to put some pressure down onto the dough with my hand and gently rotate my hand round and round. And then gradually, as I feel that dough ball coming together, I lift my palm, and with a bit of practice, you'll find they quickly shape into nice tight dough balls. These need to prove one more time before we bake. Now we're going to do that on a baking tray that's been well floured. Now I'm using a Teflon mat just to protect mine because that's my prized pizza pan and I don't want it scratched. But all you need is a baking tray that's been well floured. Now whether you're choosing to do 9 or 12 bread rolls, it doesn't matter. They need to be arranged in an even grid on that baking tray with a very small gap between them. So as they prove, they touch each other, and then when they're baked, they kind of fuse together. Not only do they look cool, but it's also going to keep that bread nice and moist and soft. You can cover them again with a large plastic bag, and we're going to leave them out at room temperature again on the work surface to prove for the last time. So this is what your bread rolls are going to look like when they've proved properly. And now I'm going to use a brush to give them a light coating of milk, and then I'm going to lightly dust them with flour. That's purely optional. You don't have to do that, but I prefer the texture that you get from these rolls when they've got a nice coating of flour. Now if you decide to make 9 bread rolls like I've done here, they're going to bake in a preheated oven at 225 degrees Celsius or 435 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes, but keep checking them during the cook. Now if you decide to go for 12 smaller bread rolls, they're going to bake in a preheated oven at 250 degrees Celsius or 480 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. So in either case, your oven shelf is going to be positioned halfway up the oven, and my oven is set to bake mode, which means the fan is turned off.
Give me something, something good. I get wasted on the thought of you.
Okay guys, that's it from me today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned.
Smoky eyes in a groove. No, I can't get you out of my mind. You're still